Pacers and Thunder here tonight. It's going to be an interesting one as, of course, the Oklahoma City Thunder have the lead in the series. Potentially close to winning their first ever NBA title. And so joining us to talk more about that, Alex Roig joins us here on the show. Well, Alex, we're getting closer and closer, my friend. It's going to be an interesting one here tonight. But I want to start and say this. Oklahoma City all season long, they've been playing such good basketball. And even with what I've been impressed with SGA, J-Dub, I do think that in this particular setting with Chet Holmgren, there's going to be some improvements that he needs to make if the Thunder really want to close it up out here tonight. How are you anticipating what this series has been like so far and what we might actually see here tonight as we get ready for Indiana?
I mean, as far as Chet goes, the good thing is, the big narrative for this game is that, is the health of Tyrese Halliburton. But one of the bigger storylines that's kind of been developing has been how Indiana is going to defend this burgeoning duo of SGA and J-Dub. And so when you start to add the defensive intensity of Chet, whatever Chet gives you on the offensive end is just the cherry on top. Like we saw in the Minnesota series, we had a couple games there where that trio scored over 90 points and just completely dominated those games. And so if you start to get into a situation where you start to get Chet scoring 18 to 20, 22 points, and then you get SGA and then you get Dub on top of that, it's going to be a landslide. As hard it is, for NBA people to kind of fathom this Indiana team being beat, by a lot of points because they're always coming back. But if you start to have that happen, it's basically over from the beginning.
I do got to say, though, because especially when walking into this series and what I watched, all postseason long, is that what's interesting about it is, Alex, is this the first time ever that we would have two small market teams going at it in search of their first NBA title. And so a lot of people, they didn't quite anticipate this, at least for some that would have expected we would have got the Lakers, we would have got the Celtics, the Heat, all these big market teams. But for the diehard basketball heads out there, they love this kind of series because it's like we've never seen this before. Now we're starting to see both these teams go at it and get there first. And I paid attention to Oklahoma City for quite a long time since they relocated from Seattle to go to OKC. And I watched the last time that they were in the finals with KD and Russell Westbrook. Covering this team as long as you have, what's kind of been the different look with OKC since the last time they were in the finals with James Harden, KD, and Russell Westbrook?
So they're a lot less KD and just Russell Westbrook. You have your star on your team. You have your offensive engine, which is different, is that every player on the floor is a five-tool player. They can dribble, they can pass, they can shoot. Maybe not to the extent where they're superstars, but to the extent where they're good role players. This iteration of this championship run with KD, with Russ, where we didn't get a championship, was the fact that we didn't have role players that were able to do so many things on the floor. You just had an Andre Robertson who could defend, but he couldn't shoot. He was an offensive zero. You had somebody like Kendrick Perkins, who great defensively, but gave you nothing on the offensive end. And so you had a ton of those types of players with the first iteration. With this new iteration, what you're seeing is you have a lot more five-tool players out there that can run an offense, that can think quick on their feet, and help support those superstars during those times where maybe they have a drought here or there, they're struggling offensively. Those guys can pick it up.
Looking at Chet Holmgren, because I've watched him since his days in college, and I think he's a very terrific player. I mean, the size, the rebound, the scoring capability. I think Chet Holmgren's got such a great future. But I got to say, though, Alex, since coming into the final, Chet's been trying to find, his consistency that what he's been doing all postseason long. So to come up into a big stage like this, there's been parts of it where it's just like there's not a ton of like that overscoring capability when SGA, J Dub, and others they start to follow, and they kind of start the run. And then Chet Holmgren, he's just got to get up there and be that rebounder. Have there been some things you've been seeing that's been tendencies that hopefully even in tonight's game, and maybe if this gets pushed up into a game 7 back to OKC, what Chet Holmgren really needs to work on if the Thunder really want to smell that first title here in this organization?
I mean, the thing about Chet is that, he missed half of the season. Like he's coming back. Like and when you say missed half of the season, like he was bedbound for about 2 months there. Like he could not do any type of physical activity. And so to ramp up to the point where he's at now, where he's playing not just playoff basketball, but NBA Finals basketball, I think what we saw, like if you kind of bookend what we saw in the first 10 games of the season, where he came out and he was averaging 22 points a game, 11 rebounds, like 4 blocks. He was basically the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year at that point when he got hurt. If you kind of bookend that to where we're at now, he's still kind of working himself back. And so it's a good thing that we do have those guys like Dub, like SGA, like, off the bench, Hartenstein, Caruso, those types of players that can actually help to kind of bolster and raise your floor whenever you have a guy like Chet that's trying to work himself still back from that injury that he suffered earlier this year.
So, SGA, I do got to say, he's had such a terrific and amazing season to put together for the Thunder this year, where they were the number 1 overall seed in the West, and to win MVP on top of that. I'm sure you've heard this conversation multiple times, Alex, and covering it with as far as the quote unquote future face of the league. I mean, everybody's been talking about, Anthony Edwards. Could he be that guy? Nikola Jokic, I mean, here's the thing. He's a great player, but I think part of it is I just don't think he really wants to hold that title because he wants to come in, play his game, and then just basically come home at the end of it. So, a lot of people throw this narrative around, but to me, what face of the league is, it's got to be somebody that's American born. And nothing against SGA, but being as a Canadian, kind of seems like it'd be a little bit odd in a sense. So when you start looking into SGA's game compared to some of these other big teams, right, like these big stars, right? How does it become comparable, and could that be something worth talking about being the face of the league, even though that we're kind of getting dipped into this international pool?
I mean, we've had international players kind of be faces of the league. Like you have Jokic, you've had Jokic the last 3 out of the 4 seasons being MVP. You had Giannis Antetokounmpo before that. You have Luka, especially being traded to LA. Now he's like, the face of the league as far as like what maybe the NBA wants to push. Like I don't think that necessarily has too much to do with it. I think the thing with SGA is that he's very similar in style and game to like a Kobe or an MJ. What is completely different about him is he doesn't have the athleticism that those first 2 players had. And so he's kind of had to make up for that with skill, with intelligence, with basketball IQ. And that's something that a lot of fans don't necessarily resonate with. Like they resonate with the athleticism. They resonate with somebody to go into the basket and just completely, slamming on people's heads and things like that. You don't resonate with smart basketball IQ, somebody that thinks the game. That's the reason why like somebody like Tim Duncan didn't really have a high Q rating. Great player, probably one of the best power forwards in the game, but not a high Q rating, still winning championships because he's that kind of cerebral player that's just, he thinks the game rather than necessarily just plays it instinctually.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense because those could be very big difference makers with those kinds of trades. Because to me, it's like when I look at face of the league and like when I watched Anthony Edwards when he played OKC, those last games before OKC eliminated the T Wolves, I mean, I was like, you can't. This is what face of the leagues don't do. They don't fold in the most important clutch times where you need to demand the ball, you need to set the tone, and then you got to be able to control the atmosphere and take over, because it's not saying you got to shoot the ball every single time, but you got to be able to set the tone for everyone to follow and then find ways to go on those runs to come back, maybe potentially tie a series or, you go on and you win it. So that's kind of, the thing that I look
Yeah.
at with face of the league. And I think he's got a lot to learn from it. But with SGA, I've been loving his play. And even at a time when I saw him with the Clippers, and people are like, did the Clippers make a mistake? I don't think so. I think ultimately it's like you had to fit the bill from when you traded for Paul George. And then,
Yeah.
SGA was going to be the future for OKC. So final question up here, because we know tonight's important, up 3-2 in the series. SGA and J-Dub, what a performance they put together in the last game. Now, I know Indiana kind of creeped in a little bit, but OKC managed to control the lead. Tonight, Tyrese Halliburton, it sounds like he is playing tonight with the injury. If OKC was to walk away with this, are there any particular plans that all of us and even for our audiences should expect in OKC? Because I know Oklahoma being, a big college town when Sooner football and, all that stuff would be going around. But man, think about how crazy the party would be for the Thunder in OKC, wouldn't it?
This is unprecedented territory for us. This is something that we've been to one. We've been to one finals. Fortunately, we didn't win it. If we do win this one, number one, it's on the road, so you have a little bit less of like people being there. But I'm actually going to Loud City Live, which is basically they open up the arena for people to go in and watch the game, the road game while it's going on. So I have no idea how we're going to react. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to see people crying. Believe me, I will see people crying. But
Yeah.
whenever we step out into the city, I don't know if there's going to be cars on fire. I don't know if there's going to be people flipping cars. Like, I don't know. People tend to lose their minds whenever that excitement of a championship happens. So I'm hoping that Oklahomans treat it like they've been here before. Unfortunately, they haven't, but treat it like that and actually just, celebrate the right way, hoot, holler, and then go home and wait for the parade. And then parade, you can go ahead and let it all out there.
Man, love it, man. Well, like I said, I've been rooting for both teams. I've never seen this before, but man, an exciting series all the way around. Both teams have been showing off their stuff and why that they deserve to be in the big stages. But if it does happen tonight, Alex, I'm sure you are definitely going to be feeling on top on cloud nine. But it's going to be exciting all the way through. But appreciate you for coming on by, man. Enjoy the game. Where can people actually find your stuff if, in fact, there's a party and everybody's got to get in for OKC this year?
So, about the only party that I'm going to throw is probably like a podcast party. So you can catch our podcast, which is Topic Thunder, not Tropic, not like the movie, Topic Thunder.
Yep.
And you can find me on Twitter at AlexRoig_NBA.
There you go, guys. Well, Alex, take care of yourself. Drive safe. Enjoy tonight. And we shall see what the outcome becomes here tonight, my friend.
Thunder up, baby.
Yes, sir. All right.